about the reading problem.
Stephen, it's a delight to be here and have a chance to talk to you about
It's good to see you, Sam.
relationship that
Yeah.
goes back so many years.
Yes.
And I was always curious as to how you found me, how you found the fact that I was
Involved with Alpha-Phonics.
had written Alpha-Phonics. And so why don't you tell me that story?
Oh, well, I remember I was reading a magazine and you were talking about the reading crisis in the United States of America, and that parents can be empowered to help their children, even if they couldn't change the school system, how to help the child not be labeled as learning disabled or diagnosed with these problems or receive drugs because they can't read. That's the bottom line, you know. And I said, well, my son at the time, he's my oldest, and he's 30 now, and he was just entering kindergarten too, and they said that he didn't pass the test to enter. And I said, I never went to kindergarten. I could only count to 15 before I went into the first grade and know a few letters, but I learned in that first year. However, he was unable, and they said he didn't pass. And I says, how am I going to help him learn? Basically, they wanted him to be able to name the letters, numbers, and do other things. I said, wow, that's kind of young. And they said, you didn't teach him at home? I said, yeah, I taught my son. I was reading to him. I read him stories. He loved history. Read these stories. Read insects. Read about the stars, the moon. Read about God. So I just read and read. And I taught from interest. When he would want to be curious about, what's that letter? Then I would respond to the child's interest so they would not get bored with the teaching. And it's the best way to learn, I thought, right? Learn from interest. Well, then he was being diagnosed to be, he's slow, he's not keeping up, he may need to go to after-school programs and all the special. And I said, there's a way. And the pastor in my church said, oh, you can get him ready. I got to find the book. And I always believed, and I was teaching English to other immigrants. And I said, you have to know the difference between the short vowel sounds and the long vowel sound. How do you know the difference? There are word families and spelling patterns. So instead of me doing the whole task, and I was tired of the books that kept showing pictures. Pictures were fine for vocabulary, but not for reading or pronouncing. So then I read your article, and I called you. I found you in the Boston area, and you told me, sure, you get the Alpha-Phonics book. I taught my son, who was the last in the class, on reading and spelling, and then he transferred, we moved out to Framingham. By the end of the first grade, he was one of the best spellers in the class. I only went up to lesson 16 with my son, a few scattered ones in between, and he was able to take this book and run with them by himself because he understood the principles of the alpha-phonetic language.
That's wonderful, yes.
And from that point, the class that he was in, Sam, in kindergarten, where they wanted to put him in kindergarten 1 or go to special needs school, by the time he was at 8th grade, he was on the team from his school, St. Tarcisius in Framingham, representing his all-star team, the Pro Bowl, on knowledge of social studies, science, literature, and the others. And his team came in 3rd place. They would have come in 2nd or 1st had the team listened to a couple of my son's answers. And they were surprised. How did this team rise so well? They were the underdog. And guess what? He defeated, with his team, his classmates, the class that he entered in his former school back in kindergarten. And he got the start from the Alpha-Phonics.
So that's how your son got started. Now, when did you become the head of W.A.I.T. House?
W.A.I.T. House, I became the head of W.A.I.T. House around the same time that my son was entering school. And that shortly thereafter, I looked at your books over 25 years ago, 26 years to be exact. And then I said, you know, all of these books that teach phonetics have these pictures, and then they're geared towards little children. It's like Sesame Street. I'm working with adults. And how can I show beautiful print, lettering that they can read, and lettering that's consistent, and that develops the language from the short vowel sounds all the way to the long vowel sounds, and then the vowel variations. And this fundamental reader has transformed people's lives from going from maybe, I would, former board member, and the board was surprised, his name was Eddie Shakir, and he said, the board member said, I never knew you could read. Well, if you thought the and but and with were the only words you could read, I don't call that reading, because everything in between I couldn't read until I took the Alpha-Phonics. Those are the quote I would quote from Eddie Shakir. He later became a board member because he was a successful businessman in Boston.
Yeah,
But many times he lost money and funds because he was unable to read certain things, and he swallowed his pride and came back to school at W.A.I.T.T House, almost retired.
Yeah.
And because his wife graduated from here, and there were caterers, and he credits Alpha-Phonics with empowering him to read and write and receive his diploma.
Wonderful. Well, how many now? So you have now. W.A.I.T.T House is an interesting acronym. It stands for "We are all in this together."
Yes.
How did that come about? Who?
The Sisters of Charity. If you know Saint Elizabeth Seton, a historical person and a great educator, and is credited with the Catholic school education, the founding of it in the United States. So the Sisters of Charity come from there, and the Sisters of Charity of Halifax, Nova Scotia, have been working now in Roxbury probably almost 130 years. And so Sister Mary Kay Brady said, you know, we need to respond to the changing needs in the community, and they came up, yeah, we're all in this together, W.A.I.T.T House. So they formed it as a non-sectarian community-based organization with the community. They were responding to the changes for early childhood education, because the sisters had always been involved with K through 12 and college. Then they realized the parents needed help. So if we're going to help the children in the Roxbury, Dorchester area, the issue is we have to help the parents. If we empower the parents with a solid education, they can pass that on to their children.
Exactly.
And as a result, Barbara Bush selected to inaugurate the Adult Literacy Initiative of Boston in 1983 at W.A.I.T.T House. So Barbara Bush inaugurated the Boston Adult Literacy Initiative at W.A.I.T.T House down the street.
I see.
And it was good that we had that communication, because the way funding is for adult basic education, you get a small portion from the state, and then there's a matching grant from the federal government. And then the rest, through the Sisters of Charity, they donate time. As Sister Catherine volunteers here, and sisters have volunteered, retired teachers, and work at W.A.I.T.T House. And then others, we live on total donations, the goodwill of people, and private and public grants.
Well, you know what's interesting is that whenever I deliver books to you, so many of the students want me to sign their books.
Yes.
And they really enjoy learning to read with Alpha-Phonics, because they know they can do it.
Yes.
I mean, success is guaranteed.
Yes, that's right.
And you're getting all of these rejects from the public schools, you know, who were not taught to read in the public schools. And then what happens when they finally find out that, hey, I can learn to read. I'm not really disabled, or I'm not stupid, you know.
I think there was a fellow, Lloyd, and there's this other type of reading that happens, Sam, that people are reading, and one of the problems, you know, you could use context clues. But if I didn't learn the fundamental skills of really how to read, if I rely too much on context clues, I can get into a guessing game. And maybe I can pass the test and move along. And some you have. So that shows there are people who are gifted out there. They're compensating for the lack of appropriate knowledge and understanding of how to read using other skills. And they're good at it. And you say, wow, if they're good at this, if we taught some easy rules that come out of the alpha-phonetic language, they could really take off.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, you know, as I've developed the system myself, as I've learned from how people have used Alpha-Phonics. For example, it's been used by homeschoolers now for the last 25 years. So many of these homeschoolers are now, you know, adults, and they all go on to splendid careers, you
Yes.
know. They're usually the top of their class or something like that, you know, and they go into the military. Many of them go into the military. And the point, I didn't realize how significant it is to teach reading without pictures.
Yes.
You see, when I did it, when I started, I said, I'm not going to use pictures. I had no idea what the basic effect would be.
Mm.
But it turns out that the effect has been magnificent.
Right.
Because what it does is it develops the left lobe, the language lobe of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where logic is.
Right.
That's where reasoning is.
Yes.
That's where the intellect is.
Mm.
The intellect is in the left lobe of the brain. And the schools force children to use the right brain
Mm-hmm.
to do the work of the left brain, you see.
That's like
Which, of
using
course,
a screwdriver for a
right,
knife.
It mars the left brain.
Yeah.
It cripples the left
Yeah.
brain, you see.
Yeah.
And they've been able to see this in these MRI visions, you
Mm.
know.
I didn't know that.
They've taken pictures of the brain now of dyslexics,
Mm.
and they say that in dyslexics the left brain has been spectacularly marred.
Wow.
So they're actually injuring the brain when they're using the look-say method, and they're still doing it in the schools.
Yes.
As I told the group of students just a short while ago, we know how to teach reading in America. It's no big deal. They don't want to teach it the way it should be taught. But they have to pretend, the schools have to pretend to teach reading. But they don't teach reading anymore. They call it teaching literacies. You see, they rarely use the term reading now. They talk about literacies, you see.
Right.
And of course they use their right brain for that kind of teaching. As a matter of fact, Teachers College in New York is where all of this started. All of the look-say teaching methods started. That's where James McKean Cattell taught. That's where Thorndike taught. That's where John Dewey taught.
Okay.
That cabal of progressives that decided to dumb down America, that's where it started there. And they're still doing it. They have a new way of doing it by hiding their emphasis on, not hiding, what they do is they emphasize the right brain, teaching the right brain. And they even have videos where they demonstrate how they're doing it. And it's on YouTube. You can actually see what they're doing.
Wow.
And they're getting away with it.
Okay.
They're getting away with it because our politicians can't tell the difference between phonics and look-say.
The issue, to go give a concrete example of a person, Lloyd, who was capable of reading,
Right.
but had major gaps,
Right.
and he received his high school equivalency diploma. He was a successful businessman, and he was volunteering at the library down the street, and the librarian called me and said, "This fellow, I don't know what to do with him." It's Lloyd. "Oh yeah, he helps you, doesn't he?" "No, he's crying right now in the library." This is a man who played semi-pro football, and he was in tears, feeling so low about himself, discouraged, because he didn't have the ability to spell. And when I brought him to the Alpha-Phonics method, and he says, "How do you deal with the exceptions to the rule?"
Right.
So I said, "Spell the word light." And he said, L-I-G-H-T. He was able to put it down on paper, no problem. "Spell the word bright," fright. I don't have an idea. He would get a couple of letters. I said, "Do you notice if I erase the BR in bright and the FR in fright, do you see a similarity between light and ite, that they all have a certain spelling pattern. They belong to this word family. So if you know how to spell light, you can spell maybe 10, 20 other words if you place them in the same word. He said, I don't recall anyone ever telling me about word families, a spelling pattern. Yes, so there are patterns to the language. So these things that are exceptions to the rule have their own rule that easily can be understood once you know that there are word families.
That's right.
And I would explain it to others. They said, how do you know someone is Spanish speaking versus Portuguese speaking? And you hear the people who are Hispanic or Cape Verdean will say, oh, the S and the Z. I said, you see, there's a word family. You can even figure out where a word comes from by knowing the spelling pattern. Exactly. And once you come to that level of understanding, you say, I'm not frustrated with English. Oh, that spelling pattern. Oh, that comes from the Latin language. That comes from the Germanic language. That comes from the Vikings. This one. And all of a sudden, you open up another world of discovery. So people are not learning rote. They're seeing it for themselves. They develop perception. Right. One of the things lacking. If we continue to just use everything with photographs to teach reading, we're shutting down, as you said, part of the brain to discover what the brain is capable of doing, which is unleashes the human mind in its potential. Exactly. And my question is, why something so simple, so efficient, so practical can be used consistently for the first 4 years of a child's education, can revolutionize the spirit of an education.
Right. Can you imagine what America would be like if everyone was taught to read with Alpha-Phonics? Our intellect, the American intellect would be super compared to the kind of dumbed down population we have today, where half of them are, functionally illiterate. I mean, testing has proven that, and it's all deliberate.
And Lloyd's story here, he only needed White House for 6 months, and he was in his late 50s when he discovered that. And then he went on to the Alpha-Phonics software. What's great about your Alpha-Phonics software, because we have to use keyboards today, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so they're on the keyboard. They can now associate, they develop keyboarding skills by associating the sound to the letter on the key. And so they're actually, there on the computer, it's interactive to the point where they're constructing the words. They're constructing the individual letter, the syllable, and the word, which is...
But what's interesting about the individual you told me about is that he was surprised that no one had ever taught him that. Yeah. And I wonder what the reaction is when some of these non-readers find out that they have been deliberately harmed by the teaching methods in the schools. Do they react? Have you seen any reaction on the part of some of your students here?
Some have, if it's really serious and if they're younger adults, you see more of the anger and the frustration. I think some of the anger and frustration for the older ones, it's been very deep.
Yeah.
We have to, much of the educational process has to be showing there's a different approach. Yeah. Somehow you have to, inside, forgive what happened. Because if you don't forgive what happened, you are not released from that frustrating time. And then once that's forgiven, you are able to live in the present and receive this new moment of discovery, the second chance on life.
Right.
And how can you then your mission in life is, how can I make sure that my child, my niece, nephew, grandchild, great-grandchildren do not succumb to the same method that I have received, or they may have not received any method.
Yeah.
No consistent method, one way or the other. So that's...
And one thing that has been very gratifying to me is that I've gotten reports from parents. There was one parent who wrote that she taught all 8 children to read with Alpha-Phonics. And she said that was the only program that they all liked. She said other programs there was a difference of opinion,
Right.
But when it came to reading and when it came to Alpha-Phonics, they all liked Alpha-Phonics.
I think the phenomenon there, what comes to mind, why would someone like it? I think it's very spiritual. There's a mystery to it.
Right.
And when I mention mystery, not in the sense that we don't have a clue. The ocean is a mystery, the sky's a mystery, but we can learn about it. We can understand the principles. Right. And I think the phenomenon is that every sound you make, I can make a letter for it.
That's right.
Or a combination of letters.
Yeah.
You make the sound, I'll make the letter. You make the letter, I make the sound.
Right.
The power to create.
Exactly.
And that is a positive thing that moves you forward in life. You come to realize there's something more to life and we see it more as a gift.
Yes.
A gift, and when we see something as a gift that you appreciate, you want to share it and pass it on.
Exactly.
And that's what we've done here.
Well, and of course that's why I'm so pleased that at least there's one school in the country that has used Alpha-Phonics to its best advantage, and of course it's turned out. By now, how many students have you had since this place opened?
Yes, we're talking thousands. I would say for the level here, which in adult education we call a grade level equivalence,
right.
So the skill level. So mostly everyone who has to be exposed to the Alpha-Phonics, it may be reading between a 0 to 5th grade level equivalent. Over that, we're talking we're talking maybe 20, 30 students a year, 10, 20. We're talking maybe 2,000 students probably been exposed to Alpha-Phonics.
2,000 students who are better able to deal with life.
Yes.
You know, now that they can read, and certainly they're going to teach their kids to read with phonics.
That's right. Yes.
Now that they know the difference.
Exactly. Yes. So
that's terrific.
Yeah, and this also has been used for those who have come to the school who are immigrants. In W.A.I.T.T House, we would take someone who knows enough English. Maybe they can't articulate everything they want to say in English, but they have enough understanding where they can sit alongside in the classroom with someone who grew up here or was born here. And when they receive the Alpha-Phonics, the method, it's like, wow, I didn't know this. It's always about, I didn't know.
Well, that's right.
And when
they didn't know, because they don't teach it in our schools.
Right.
That's the interesting thing is they refuse to teach this in the schools.
And then you have teachers here and there who are trying to fill in the gaps themselves, and the system is not giving them the support they need.
Exactly.
And then the other is you're mixing two methods of reading. And what happens when we mix two methods?
And that confuses the student. And of course, when you learn to read with phonics, you develop a phonetic reflex. That is, you automatically look at you automatically look at the structure of the word, the phonetic structure.
Yes.
You can break the big words up into syllables and that sort of thing. But when you're taught to read by sight, you develop an automatic ability, an automatic, how would you say, method of looking at each word as a whole picture. So you can't see the phonetic structure.
So you lose the ability to diagnose.
Right. You can't see it.
Yeah.
And that causes dyslexia. That actually is dyslexia, is the inability to see the phonetic structure of the word, because you're looking at it as if it were a Chinese character.
Yes.
You know, that sort of thing. And I recently read an article in The Reading Teacher. This particular article, the purpose of the article was to determine how do children learn a sight vocabulary. And they decided that because some of our words are flat, some of our words have, tall letters and bottom letters, and some have emotional impact. So they said, well, the kids will remember the words with the emotional impact best. But the flat words, the words that all look the same, they have to be repeated over and over and over again in order to learn them. And of course what we have found is that people often forget sight words. They don't remember even the words that they learned a couple of years ago. They forget them, you know.
Yeah, unless you're gifted with a sight.
Yeah.
You know,
So the sight method is so inadequate, so destructive, and yet they keep using it, and they actually try to think of better ways of teaching it, you know.
Yeah,
It's impossible.
because the method here of breaking up the words into the forms of syllables, right? And then you teach the method from there to develop a vocabulary. Here's the root word,
Right.
here's the suffix,
Right,
here's the
right.
prefix. So when you are teaching to figure out how the structure of the word is, you know their ability to solve math problems increases
No kidding.
because they're using logic. What do
Right.
you need in math?
Right.
You
And
need
this
the-
is
need the lo-
logical. This is logical.
Right, so you're breaking the
Right.
words apart, and all of a sudden you say the word fill. Does anyone have a person? Yeah, it's PH. Why is it PH? Why don't they make it F? I said because that name's origins is found in the Greek language. So
Right.
most of your PH words are from the Greek, so you can figure out some Greek. And it's wow. And then it says, what's that big city that's important in the United States history? Oh yeah, Philadelphia.
Right.
Gee, what do they call it? City of Brother. Do you know why they call it the City of Brotherly Love? I don't have an idea. Think of it. Phil. You call your son Phil. His name is Love.
Right.
What is it, brother? Oh, love. City of Brotherly Love. You got Phil, Philadelphia, philology. You philanthropist. All of a sudden, you build a person's vocabulary from one small concept,
Right.
the root of a word, and then they know the word origin. You're making them say, I don't have to learn one word individually. The look-say method, I'm looking at the whole word.
Right.
Here you're diagnosing the word, and then you find out its origin and its meaning, and you develop your vocabulary, not learning one word at a time, but multiply.
Multiple words.
And
Exactly.
what that type of thinking is critical to improving your math.
Oh, absolutely. Really? And math.
Right, because all of a sudden you're seeing the structure of a formula. Why is this formula? You're using your mind in such a way, the same way you're looking at the structure of words, breaking them apart, pulling them together, you're now doing
That's
it with
wonderful.
math. Those are transferable skills.
Stephen, are you writing a book on this?
I would love to if I had the time, yes.
But I wanted to show you a new edition of Alpha-Phonics that
Yeah.
I've created, because this book is you know, $25,
Right,
and I wanted one to sell for less than $10
wow,
because of the many people who can't afford,
right,
you know, a bigger book. But the contents are the same,
wow, that's
the
great.
exact same contents, except that I changed the title, Phonics for Success.
Okay, all right,
And the road to high literacy made easy.
wow.
You see.
This is, and the print is still large enough for
Yeah,
our
oh yeah, it's
older
still large
eyes.
enough. It's still large enough, you see.
That's great.
And it's the exact same contents,
Uh,
but
I must.
I figured that there was a need for a less expensive edition, so that the schools would have no excuse, you know, for not buying it, for not using it, you know.
This would be a great if we find someone with a philanthropic effort
Right.
to get as many as these into the hands of young children and
Yeah, if
parents.
we could get a millionaire.
Oh,
do,
right,
do you
yes.
know any?
We have to write to them. We know them by on the
Right.
headlines of our newspapers.
Well, that would be great, you know,
Yeah.
if we could get some wealthy businessman
Yeah.
who feels about literacy as we do,
Yes.
and is willing to invest, you know, in a program to get this book. This could change the world if everybody learned to read by phonics. Do you
Yeah.
know the difference it would make?
Huh.
You know, in the ability to lead a competent life.
Yes. And you would think, you know, physical education is so important in the
Right.
sports and in the music programs. They get
Right.
first ones to be cut and
Yeah.
charging poor families to attend.
Right.
Or then you're asking the taxpayers to pay more money. If we reduce the cost of education, how?
Yeah.
By investing in the proper tools to teach
Right,
our
right.
children, we would then have additional dollars to expand and develop the music and sports
Yeah,
programs
exactly.
that children need and love, you know?
Well, teaching reading is very inexpensive.
It is, yeah.
I mean, if you do it the phonics way,
Right.
it's inexpensive. It doesn't cost much at all. But if you're going to teach reading by the look-say method, it becomes very expensive, because then they use, you know, beautiful pictured books with lavish pictures in full color.
Yes.
Like, for example, this teacher over at Teachers College was demonstrating how she was teaching reading. Actually, she was not teaching them to read, she was teaching them about reading.
Oh.
See, they don't teach kids to read anymore. They teach them about reading.
The key is
And
how to read. How do I approach?
No, they don't. No. For example, she had this big book on an easel. Every page was a full color, and the story was about a vacuum cleaner which would not stop. And the print was very small at the bottom. But she had the children, she said, "What is the purpose of reading?" They didn't know. And so she says the purpose of reading is to guess what's going to happen later on, is to predict what's going to happen in the story. Is that the purpose of reading? To predict what the author is going to say later on? You see, so she already was lying to the kids. And then she says...
Today they wouldn't say that. That's misinforming the children.
Yeah, misinforming the kids. And then she said, and the second reason for reading is to solve the problem. You don't read a book to solve a problem.
I read for me, the books I read for joy and gave me insight.
Right, insight.
Allowed me to discover things about the world or about myself that I may have not known before.
That's right. You didn't read to predict the end of the book or solve the problem, but this is what she concentrated the lesson on, and these kids were sitting on the floor, you know, and looking at her, dumbfounded. They were being misinformed about what reading is, you see.
If I were in that situation, knowing my mind as a child, I would be very bored, and my mind would wander tremendously.
Yeah.
And then my attention span, where would it be? It would have a deficit.
Exactly. It would be a deficit. But that's what's going on in today's schools. And they are so proud of this method that they're using, because they think they can fool enough people to buy it.
You know the method I received? I received the phonics method in school. I saw some of those.
Well, you went to Catholic school.
Right, but there was some of those look-say books being introduced at the time.
Yeah, they did.
But it allowed me to dissect the words. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And I was a good oral reader. I had a serious speech problem as far as my health record was for the 8-9 years. And out of all my brothers and sisters, my father said I had the gift. I said, "What gift?" "To speak." And I said, "I'm the one with the serious speech problem." He was a public speaker. He taught people public speaking. And so I had no problem with the oral reading. His method for teaching me, he says, go up into the room, read from the side.
So he actually taught you to read.
Develop my reading skills to a level that could be presented before a public audience without falling apart.
Right.
So that people can understand you. From those particular reading skills and methods, he was like, you know how to read, but I'm going to help you read in public, to have the proper rhythm, the proper cadence.
And the proper pronunciation. Yeah.
So the method he used was go up into your room, you know how to read, any words that are difficult, don't worry, mark them down. And then I would read a reading from the first reading, the Old Testament, a psalm, a reading from the New Testament, and the Gospel. And then he'd say, after you read it 3 times out loud, then orally come down and see me. He would stand in the corner and face the wall. The reason for that, because I wouldn't be intimidated by my father's presence.
Yeah.
And he said, I will listen to you, and then you read. And then He'd have me
You had
read
a
the whole,
great,
and then he
great-
would stop on the word. After
Yeah.
I read the whole thing, he said, "Go back to this sentence
Yeah.
and read this word. This is how you say it. Drop your voice, raise your voice."
Yeah.
And this is the methods to which we've lost for oratorical skills. But those the interest to say, if you're the one who has the serious speech problem, Sam, in your family,
Right.
it's on your health right, not on your
Oh
reading.
yeah,
And your father says you have a gift.
right.
What gift? That's like saying
That's
to the one who's got
wonderful.
all thumbs, he says, "You're going to be the great carpenter."
Yeah.
Dad, they always call me all thumb. And lo and behold,
You know, and
because of
that's-
that level of faith and trust, which is
On
a
the
spirit.
part of a parent is really wonderful. He was a gift to you.
Yes, he was. That's right.
Because I'm helping a young lady write a book, and she told me that her mother said that she would never amount to anything. Can
Wow.
you imagine a
Wow.
parent telling that to a child?
Yeah, that's more abusive than
Yeah,
some of the physical abuse we read
right.
here about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to actually tell a child that.
Yeah.
But your blessed Father certainly gave you the courage and the desire
Yes.
to excel, to
And
move ahead.
And from that point, from his, at age 18, here for 8 years with the serious speech problem, from the senior year at age 18, graduating from high school, I was appointed as a judge on oratorical eloquence at Faneuil
Wow.
Hall, along with a superintendent of school, a journalist, a reporter, a dean of a college. And I'm 18 years old, graduating from high school, and I'm one of the judges. Because they recognize his ability, but it was what my father recognized. So there's this ability, once you lay this proper foundation,
Yeah,
and someone has some other difficulties, like myself, or a neurological problem, or an
Right.
accident, but once the foundation is properly laid,
yeah,
the rest of the work is cosmetic.
right,
It's fine tuning, because the person knows how to read.
yeah.
Now we're going to help you read well, to project your voice, to give a presentation, to see the spirit of the word.
Oh,
It-
that's
it lit-
marvelous. That's
Because this
marvelous.
type of, because this reading here liberated
Yeah.
the Israelites.
Oh, that's right.
The spiritual
It made
dimension of
exactly.
taking someone from slavery into freedom.
To freedom, right. That's a very important
And
point
to
make.
me, to alter it, to take it away from its roots, because we found there are exceptions to the rule, that the spelling patterns in
Yeah.
English are just too difficult for
Yeah.
our poor children. Are we being condescending? What is the method behind that thinking?
Well,
And the
you
method
know what
behind
the method
it is,
is.
right.
It was a
But many do not
yeah.
know, and many teachers who teach these methods do not know.
Do not know.
Because
Exactly.
they've invested their time, their money, and they said, "This is the way we do it." And this is a battle, because you have to challenge a person's thinking that they've been, in a sense, conditioned for 20 years of their education. And this is a difficult road, but if we can somehow take the blinders off of teachers and have the courage to move
Well,
forward.
that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
But the schools that teach the kids, that teach the teachers, are so corrupt now, have been so corrupted by the progressive movement, that it's almost that teachers turn away from the minute they hear the word phonics, they turn away from it, because they've been told that phonics is bad, that phonics is evil, So we're dealing with a very difficult situation. Now, Stephen, do you have any words that you want to tell the people out there about, first of all, about W.A.I.T.T House? How can they help W.A.I.T.T House?
Okay, go on. And helping W.A.I.T.T House. W.A.I.T.T House is
Look
a
at
non-profit, community-based organization.